are in 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 12. You know, Saul is after David. Saul wants to kill David. I'll pin him to the wall. We kind of ended class last week, verse 11. I'll pin him to the wall. And of course, David eluded him twice. I'm going to just shut these doors just a second.
So many times to kill David.
He's after David. He's going to be after David for the next 10 years. Verse 12. Saul was afraid of David. Over and over again, we have a reoccurring theme because the Lord was with David, but had departed Saul. You know, Saul must have known by this time that he was fighting a losing battle, but he just would not give up. Again, he was the king, and he wanted David dead. But Saul continues to put David to work. Verse 13, he puts him over 1,000 men, and he sends him to fight the Philistines. But David's thought, this is the deceptiveness of King David. His thought was, if David is killed in battle, then it's somebody else's fault. It's the Philistines' fault. If he loses the battle, then maybe David will lose some of the popularity, some of his good standing that he's got with the people. I just thought this was really, really ironic. And we're going to see this if we ever get into 2 Samuel. But David uses this same evil scheme as he deals with Uriah the Hittite, Bathsheba's husband. That's 2 Samuel chapter 11. David sent him to the front line to be killed. Remember, he's going to send him to the front line, and then he's going to tell everybody else to back off. That's in verse 15, 2 Samuel 11. Well, Saul's plan did not work. Verse 14, in everything he did, in everything David did, he had great success. And the reason, again, because the Lord was with him. Because the Lord was with him. And the results of Saul's evil plan so far, due to David's success, Saul continued to be afraid. Verse 15, and all Israel and Judah loved David. Verse 16. Saul just would not give up. Saul just would not give up. And remember, because David had took on this Philistine giant, since he had killed Goliath, he was to be given one of Saul's daughters in marriage. But now Saul makes this conditional. If you look at verse 17, if you continue to fight the battles of the Lord. So Saul is kind of changing what he had said. He's kind of breaking his promise about giving him one of the daughters. Now it's, I'm going to give you a daughter, but you've got to continue to fight the Philistines. We'll read 17 here a minute. He's not above breaking his promises. Saul is not. And he's not above using his oldest daughter, Merab, as part of his plan to get rid of David. Verse 17, Saul said to David, here is my older daughter, Merab, R-E-M-E-R-A-B, Merab, I'm sorry. I will give her to you in marriage, only serve me bravely and fight the battles of the Lord. For Saul said to himself, I will not raise a hand against him. I'm going to let the Philistines do that. So now the Philistines become part of this evil plan to kill David. But David humbly declined, verse 18, saying that my family is not worthy for me to be related to the king. And Merab, the daughter, was given to another man. Well, again, Saul doesn't give up. more of Saul's evil plan to get rid of David, he finds out that his other daughter, his younger daughter, Michal, is in love with David. And this pleased Saul. Verse 20, chapter 18, verse 20. This pleased Saul. But notice why it pleased him. Verse 21. I will give her to him, he thought, so that she may be a snare to him, and so that the hand of the Philistines may be against him.
She must have been a booger.
Let me tell you, we've got some more things to say about the daughter Michal. And listen to Saul, verse 21. Listen to this prideful, devious comment. Now, Saul is speaking to David. Now you have a second opportunity to become my son-in-law. Isn't that just a little prideful? Isn't that just, in knowing the pretext behind it, he wants her to be a snare, a little bit devious. You know, and Saul even got his servants to lie. Verse 21. They're supposed to go talk to David. Look, the king likes you. No, he doesn't. King doesn't like him at all. And his attendants all love you. Well, no, they don't. And because of this, now become his son-in-law. Now because of lies. That's what they are, lies. Remember, Saul wanted to snare David, wanted to trick him, wanted to catch him in a trap. Lies on top of lies, deceit on top of deceit. David humbly replied, and we're in verse 23. Do you think it a small matter to become the king's son-in-law? I'm only a poor man and little known. So two issues. David said, I'm poor and I'm little known. Well, even though David was had some means, he didn't think he had enough to pay the bride price, the dowry for a king of the daughter, for a princess. Saul kind of takes a step back and says, let's try this a different way. I've got another deceptive plan for you. Verse 25. The king wants no other price for the bride than 100 Philistine foreskins to take revenge on his enemies. This is a pretty harsh demand from Saul, and a pretty gallant act of military service for David to complete. So David says, okay, this will be enough to pay this bride price, this dowry. And it would make him better known. True intent, verse 25, Saul's plan was to have David fall by the hands of the Philistines. Verse 26 says something that I couldn't find a whole lot about. It says, before the allotted time elapsed. What do your footnotes say? I never could find out just exactly what this plan meant. Before the allotted time elapsed. Do your footnotes say anything, or y'all?
Well, there's probably a time limit that Saul said on getting it done. That's before that time limit elapsed. That's what I might indicate.
Ron?
There might be a customary time for the price to be paid for the bride.
Both of these, excellent point. A customary time that a guy has to pay this dowry, to pay, and also, Ed, he had been issued a pretty stern demand, so there could be a time limit on him killing those Philistines. So yeah, I just didn't see anything, and kind of poured over a couple, so I had to make some assumptions too. Both of those, well, whatever, however, whichever, this time limit, like you said, Ed, it had been met. Verse 26, David was pleased to become the king's son-in-law. Verse 27, the kind of guy that David is, this young, courageous, brave warrior, he killed 200 uncircumcised Philistines and brought back 200 foreskins. And then Saul gave Michal to David in marriage, verse 27. Again, David continued to be more successful, not 100, but 200. But Saul was not successful in snaring David and using his daughter's marriage to kill him. Verse 28 and 29. Then Saul realized that the Lord was with David, and his daughter Michal loved David. Saul became still more afraid of him, and he remained his enemy the rest of his days. David continued to successfully battle the Philistines, verse 30, and his name became well known. So Saul continued to go backwards, and David continued to go forwards. Psalms 18:27. David says, "You save the humble, but you bring low those whose eyes are haughty." You just had to wonder if he was thinking about Saul, if he was thinking about his relationship with Saul, because Saul's eyes were definitely haughty, prideful, where David tried to stay humble. I want to close class today, close this chapter by talking about probably some of my, without a doubt, some of my favorite verses. In Ephesians 6, Paul tells us we need to put on the full armor of God. And he starts out this whole scenario putting on this armor by saying, finally, Ephesians 6:10, finally be strong in the Lord, in his mighty power. And then in verse 11, Ephesians 6:11, put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Against the devil's schemes. Satan is a schemer.
And there's a war going on all the time between God and Satan.
Every day. Helen, we need to suit up for battle every day. Because Satan is a schemer. If you decide you don't want to put that helmet of salvation on one day, where's he going to attack you? If you decide you don't want to put on the breastplate of righteousness, where's he going to attack you? I'm sorry, Mary, I cut you off.
No, it's going to hit the heart.
Absolutely. He's a schemer. He will find your weakness. He'll attack good people to bring reproach upon the church. He'll use people to fulfill his evil schemes. We see the last many chapters, how he's used Saul. So what are some of the devil's schemes today? What are some of the devil's schemes today?
False teaching is so strong. It's so strong that it's not the gospel. That's what is so strong for me, is that we're not teaching the gospel, we're teaching people's ways. We're teaching, we're going to the music. You can't have the music, we're going a different way. It's always the different way. There's always my say so. God doesn't govern our lives. And that's
Things that kind of pull us away from the truth.
Yeah.
Things that just
it's really hard, strong today, because it's in your own people. It's on the television. Television influences our whole lives, in and through, the way we live, the way we think, the way we do things.
Mary, that's scary. Hang on to that thought about the TV. We're going to talk some more about that.
Use the word of God every day.
So definitely a scheme of the devil.
Turn it off and don't listen to it.
I think so. I think so. And that's again, Mary, that's a little scary, because we're gonna have some things to say about that a little bit later. What are some other schemes of the devil?
The world's values, to believe in the world's values, material.
Materialistic, the watered down value system that we live by today. Satan is using that. Have you ever been afraid to send your kids to school?
That would be today.
Not today.
Absolutely, Sandra. Things that we would have never imagined, not just too many years ago. Have you ever been afraid to go to church?
Yes.
You know, Jack Cummings, down in the Dallas area, Dewan, I couldn't remember, actually had a gunman come into their worship assembly not too many years ago. And that probably had some people fearful. Schemes of the devil. Schemes. He will take advantage of anything that's out there.
Faith is always attacked. The foundation of our faith, that
You go to church?
everything that he does is attacked. Did God really say whatever he tempted Eve? Did God really say not to eat the fruit of the tree? Yes, God really said that. That's what she should have said.
Ed, he's been a schemer a long time, using anything and everything, and he knows us, he knows me too well.
He'll use God's word too, because he knows the word.
But that's the way that Jesus Christ defeated Satan in the wilderness, was the word of God. Hold on, cling to that word of God. What are some things that we've learned in chapter 18? I know we kind of started in the middle today. What did we learn? Some of your thoughts.
Satan doesn't give up.
Wow, Duan. Yeah. If you decide to put on that particular piece of armor that day, Satan just looks for a different way.
Right.
Doesn't he? He just looks for.
He doesn't want to die.
No, he will not.
He will die because you have to wait until Jesus comes.
He will.
He's on the devil.
And he knows where he's going. The hell is prepared for him. And he knows it, but he's not gonna give up.
No, ma'am. We're in that battle every day with a very staunch enemy. With a very staunch enemy.
He wants to take as many of them with him as he can.
Instead of going, it's
Well,
He
he
wants-
knows he can't go to heaven, so he wants everybody to go down with him.
The Lord listens to what we say and what comes out of our hearts. And, you know, sometimes, like you said, the devil has schemes. Well, what we say, if it could produce from God, it'll come. Because you say, I'm lonely, I'm sad, I don't have nobody else. That's where the devil is coming in, to devour you, to see if they can get you. So you're gonna have to stand strong in the word of God. And you gotta speak those words of God, teach and tell the devil those things.
prowls around like a roaring
Yeah.
lion, doesn't he? I think that's in 1 Peter. Yeah,
We have to
proud.
speak with each other the words of God. We have to be teaching ourselves what the word has taught us and live that way.
Absolutely. Jenny?
Ever since the Eve was tempted by the forbidden fruit, the devil's been busy.
Because he won. Because he was able to convince people to go against what God had told them.
He
So-
used one word, one
What's,
wrong word.
and
He
what,
said the Lord did not, and it's the wrong word.
but, yes,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's kind of interesting that two of Saul's children loved David.
wow,
Yes.
wow. You know, Jonathan's gonna try to use a little bit of logic with David a little bit later on, because he had a profound love for David. Absolutely.
That's interesting, that a love for man, but it's a good love, innocent love, pure love. And I did like that, reading that part, because that's really wonderful for men to really care for each other. And women too.
Absolutely.
And women too.
Remember, envy rots the bones. We think that Jonathan was a bit older than David. Some people say by 25 to 28 years. Praise is a test. Proverbs 27:21, we can either be humble or we can be prideful. And then the one, Satan just does not give up. He's a schemer. Let's get into chapter 19. Saul's heart was so possessed with jealousy and hatred for David that he openly admits his desire to kill David. He tells his son Jonathan and some of his attendants in chapter 19, verse 1, kill David. Wiersbe makes a couple of comments. He says, the hope of Israel lay in the heart and the ministry of David, and yet Saul wanted him dead. Just another one of the devil's schemes. David would, and these are just some things that David does, and we're kind of looking at 1st and 2nd Chronicles on Friday morning, so I might have grabbed some thoughts out of that, but he conquers Israel's enemies and consolidates the kingdom. He would gather much of the wealth used to build and furnish the temple. He would write psalms for the Levites to sing in praising God, and he would even design some of the instruments that they played. So David was very active, had a lot of positive things. Wiersbe makes another comment. He said God's covenant with David would keep the light shining in Jerusalem during the dark days of that nation's decline. And fulfillment of that covenant would bring Jesus Christ, the Messiah, into the world. No wonder Satan was so determined to kill David. No wonder Satan was so determined to kill David. Well, Saul must have known that Jonathan would tell David, the last part of verse 1 and verse 2, but Jonathan had taken a great liking, Sharon had taken a great liking to David and warned him, my father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning, go in hiding and stay there. Was Saul trying to frighten David, trying to get him to leave? You know, that would solve his problem. Was he testing Jonathan? Jonathan, who are you most loyal to? Is it David or is it me? Either way, Jonathan tells David, Saul means what he says. He's looking for a chance to kill you. Watch out tomorrow morning. In fact, you need to go hide. 19 verse 3, I'll speak to my father in the morning and I'll tell you what I find out. Well, over the next few verses, Jonathan presents his father with two arguments. One of them, David is an innocent man. He doesn't deserve death. David has served Saul faithfully by winning some great victories against the Philistines for Israel. Last part of verse 5, Jonathan asked, why? Talking to Saul, why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason? Jonathan even goes to his father with some logic, and it seemed like it worked. Wiersbe said that Saul was enjoying a sane moment, and he agreed with his son not to kill David, and he even made an oath not to kill David. Verse 6, as surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death. Well, Jonathan can't wait to tell David the good news. David is kind of back in good standing with Saul. Verse 8, once more, war broke out, and David went out and fought the Philistines. Again, David was successful. Verse 9, again, an evil spirit from the Lord came upon Saul. envy, jealousy, anger. Once again, Saul just wanted to pin him to the wall with his spear. Saul had broke the oath by trying to kill David. David knew it was time to leave. Has there ever been a time in your life when you just knew it was time to get out of there? You knew it was just time to leave. It was just, you weren't going to convince, change. It was just time.
Well, thank the Lord, they weren't gonna kill me.
But you know,
I understand.
yeah, Sandra, there have been that time when, you know, you kind of just need to, what is it, dust your feet off and move on. I might have gotten that a little bit out of, but you just knew it was time to go. You just knew that it was time to go. And this begins that 10-year period that we talked about. It's 10 years of exile, 10 years of being hunted, 10 years of being chased down. But during that 10-year period, David was being molded. And we're going to see that David was being prepared to be the next king of Israel. But what's the first thing that a husband wants to do? If he's fixing to get out of town, he wants to go talk to his wife, Michal, in this case. And Saul knew that he would probably want to go talk to his wife, Michal. So verse 11, Saul sent men to David's house to watch it and to kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, warned him, if you don't run for your life tonight, tomorrow we'll be killed. She let him down through a window and he escaped. And then Michal does something pretty crafty. She arranges a dummy in the bed by using an idol in goat's hair. Well, first thing I wondered was what was Saul's daughter, David's wife, doing with an idol in her house? One the size of a man that, you know, she could kind of disguise.
They all had, they kept on having idols.
I think that was a chronic condition. So my question is, do we have idols in our house?
Yes.
Do we have idols in our houses?
You mean clutter?
Uh,
That kind of stuff?
got a book on the shelf.
Got magazines?
Got a book on the shelf.
That would be the item you grab when the house is on fire, when you're gonna take it out with you.
You know, the first thing you'd grab after you knew people were saved, God's at War. Kyle Idleman wrote a book, that's a little G, God's at War. And we were looking the other day at that chapter on entertainment. And he asked that question, do we have idols? And then he asked a series of questions. Is there something in the center of your family room? The room where your family gathers. Is it large and obviously the focus of your attention? Does every seat in your family room focus
TV.
in one direction? Mary, you talked about it. Helen, you were right on our TVs, Bob. Bob, now we tend to be a little bit of conflict with our cell phones and iPads and Facebook and whatever else is out there. Average American watches 4.5 hours of TV a day. Average American home, that TV is on 8 hours a day. Offers more than 100 channels. Cindy, I think we've got 300, don't we? 300 channels. Who watches 300? I'm sorry, Mary?
Phone, you know, even a 2-year-old or 3-year-old, you can't talk to them. You can't hug them. You can't play game or read a book. And I tell myself, that irritates me.
So, Mary, I mean, the only thing they know how to use better than an iPhone is what? That remote on that TV. That remote on that TV. So where does your family spend the most time? All together. Where does your family spend? I heard of one young couple that has 12 TVs. 12. They got a big house and 12. Cindy and I were out of town first part of the week. We stayed in the Holiday Inn Express. There was a TV in the bathroom at a Holiday Inn Express. I'm kind of cheap. Holiday Inn Express, there was a TV. And of course, Idleman's concern, to make the point. We've gone from watching to worshiping. We've gone from watching TV to worshiping. Yes, Ron.
We have a problem believing that what we see on TV is true. One of the ladies ski, watched Wonder Woman. And out in California, and I could be out there, and she come back so disappointed. Says, that lady that picked up the back of that truck had cables.
Yeah, Ron, you got to be, you got to be very cautious about anything that you believe on TV that you're exposed to. Because that's could be one of the devil's schemes. Nothing wrong with entertainment, nothing wrong with TV, unless you go from watching to worshiping, unless you make an idol out of it. And an idol is anything that takes you away from God. Anything that takes you away from God. I had a couple of commentaries to agree that this idol that Michael used was something called a teraphim. That's a decorative statue. Now, you've all seen pictures of these little podiums that had a statue sitting on top of it, kind of maybe a bust, maybe just the head up or the torso up. Not for sure if those things were worshipped, but Helen, I agree with you. What I could find, they were in a lot of houses back during that time. Again, don't know whether they were worshipped, who they portrayed, but a pretty common item. But it must have looked real, because the men that verse 14, the men that Saul sent to capture David took one look at it, goat's hair and all, and said, "Boy, he's ill." I kind of laughed. Well, this guy looks sick, and if you can imagine that bust with that goat's hair stuck in it.
Especially his hair.
Oh yeah.
That looks real bad.
We have one grandson. He would kill me, so I'm not going to tell his name. But he woke up in the morning and we called it crazy hair.
I thought my granddaughter Harriet.
Could you imagine that sight? And they actually kind of believed it, because they came back and told Saul said, "Bring the whole bed. I want him dead." To paraphrase, I want him dead. Well, on closer inspection, it wasn't a person. It wasn't David. But I'm going to interject a little homework. Read Psalms 59. Read Psalms 59 because we think this was written by David about the time that Saul was starting to chase him. 59:17. David says, "You are my strength. I sing praise to you. You, God, are my fortress, my God on whom I can rely." David's running for his life. Jonathan's told him to get out of town, but he still knew where his strength came from and where his fortress was. Saul said to Michael, "Why did you deceive me like this?" I'm in verse 17, chapter 19, verse 17. Saul said to Michael, "Why did you deceive me like this and send my enemy away so that he escaped?" Well, like father, like daughter, both deceivers, like father, like daughter, both were liars. Because when Michal was confronted by Saul, she lied, claiming that David had threatened her if she didn't cooperate with him and help him escape. Verse 17. So David fled to Saul. David fled to Samuel, excuse me. David fled to Samuel, who lived in Ramah, and told him everything that was going on. Verse 18. Samuel was what to David? Samuel was what to David? A mentor?
And for the spiritual,
Spiritual
he was,
Advisor.
advisor? Yeah, someone he looked up to, someone he trusted. Isn't that the same thing when we're having a tough time and we're going through some difficulty and we need some help? Don't we do that same thing? We look for somebody that we trust, somebody that's that advisor, somebody that cares about us. Well, that's what Samuel was to David.
he was the one who selected him and anointed him to be king, the next king. So Samuel was really fond of David. So David never forgot that.
That's Mary. That's who I'm going to. That's who I'm going to. Somebody that, you know, there's a connection. There's mutual feelings for. I think our bell is fixing to ring, and I'm gonna stop right. I'm gonna stop right there. Any other comments that you guys have for today?
We're thinking about Jonathan and his admiration for David. And Saul was always trying to use Jonathan against him. You know, if you don't get rid of David, you won't become king. But I'm thinking that Jonathan may have seen that in David, he has more of what the king should be. So therefore.
And it was the comment that you made last week that Saul already knew that he was not going to have that lasting legacy, that Jonathan was not going to be that king. So yeah, I think he could not only see the writing on the wall, if you will, but he could see that in David. He could see that trusted friend.
I think also David knew what Samuel had told him. He had been anointed and told him what was gonna happen, that he was gonna be king. So he's going to the man that's told him all this and said, it's not working that way. And what's happening right now, because I'm supposed to be anointed king at some point in time.
Yeah, I think Jonathan very clearly had to make a choice. And we're going to see that's very, very obvious as we continue on with Jonathan and David's friendship, and what Jonathan does when Saul is chasing David, trying to kill him. That's where we'll take up next week. Enjoy the class.
Thank you.
Enjoy the
Thank
class.
you, Mack.